Now I'm going to switch from site selection stuff to talking specifically about our program. So again, I work for the Native Village of EAC, and I wanted to give a quick overview of the Native Village of EAC and what they do. So they're the federally recognized tribal government for the EAC. They're celebrating their 42nd anniversary here coming up. And their mission is to create opportunities for tribal members while protecting their land and the resources within it. NVE has a lot of amazing tribal member services that are also community-wide services, including things like healthcare. They run Elanka, family services, subsistence and food security services, economic development. And they create job opportunities and job training, which is one of the reasons why they're interested in mariculture and providing opportunities for their tribal members to get involved in the industry. My department is the Department of the Environment and Natural Resources. We do a lot of other things besides mariculture. We do some ocean acidification monitoring in conjunction with the Lutic Pride Marine Institute. There's also some really cool brownfield programs going on where they're cleaning up contaminated sites on the Delta. And then we're in year, I think, 22 of the Chinook Escapement Monitoring Program. And that's what this picture is right down here. That's one of the fish wheels that's on the Copper River. So we have crews out on the Copper River in 2 different spots all summer long, just counting kings, tagging them, sending them upriver to get caught again, and then figuring out how many fish are in the water. We're starting to branch out to look at other places where those kings are going and where they're spawning and how, basically how well they're able to survive to get to those spawning areas. So we're going to talk about our mariculture program. I'm going to tell you guys where it is, how we're growing kelp, because we're using a different method than what everybody else in the Sound and in Alaska is doing, an update on how it's actually going, and then I wanted to give an overview of one of our programs that's going on in tandem, which is our Tribal Use Mariculture program. So first and foremost, so I don't have a map up here, but I think you guys have all seen the map of where the kelp leases are in the Sound right now. So when we were trying to site our place, you know, one thing that really jumped out at us is there are a lot of leases in Simpson Bay. One thing I don't think we got to talk about yet, and Brent from DNR didn't bring up, but it's my understanding that DNR doesn't want more than 1/3 of each bay being taken up with mariculture leases. So Simpson Bay is getting plugged. The further out you go, the more expensive, like Teo was talking about, it is to get to your site. We all know what the weather is like here, so further out, if you start going into Port Fildago and Gravina, it's going to be really expensive, and it's probably going to cut into any sort of profits that you're trying to look at. So we started looking at other ways to grow kelp. Like, can you grow kelp in a more exposed area versus all of the nice protected areas in Simpson Bay and Cheeks Bay? And we had a great introduction to a group out of the Faroe Islands right here called Ocean Rainforest. They've been growing kelp in the Faroe Islands since 2013. This is a picture of their setup. They have very similar land masses and fjord systems as we do. They don't have any trees, which is one thing that we're kind of worried about with our kelp farm, if we're going to get trees stuck in our system, because they've never had to worry about that. But if you look at this map and follow those lines, they are basically on the same exact latitude as we are. They have the same amount of lights, same time period of year. They also have really, really big storms. I'd say some of their storms are even bigger. Where their locations are in the Faroe Islands, sometimes you look out the bay, depending on where you are, and the next stop is Norway. So they have a lot of fetch. So they've created these awesome systems to hold up in those pretty hazardous and harsh conditions. And so we wanted to see if we could use one of their systems here in a more exposed location that is still close to town. So this is a schematic of what their system looks like. So this is growing 30 to 45 meters of water. It's about 100 to 150 feet of water. What it is it's just one straight main line going out about 1,500, 1,600 feet long, so about a quarter of a mile long. And then it has all of these dropper lines that are about 30 feet long going into the water. So they're growing kelp all through the water column instead of just at the surface. And one of the cool things about this system is, you have 1,600 horizontal feet of line, but you're growing 15,000 feet of kelp within that line, if it grows at depth, which is the question we're trying to answer right now. So potentially you can pack in more grow line in this instance than with the horizontal Patmeri arrays that are only at the surface.
Okay. Lines going down, are they weighted?
Yes, that's what this little, excuse me, square is on the bottom. So we have a 1 pound rebar weight at the end of each one of those lines. And this is what it looks like in the Faroe Islands when they pull it up. So this is the main line, and then these are those dropper lines that are the grow lines and have all of that delicious looking kelp growing off. We're growing sugar kelp. That's what this is in this picture. There are a few little volunteers of ribbon kelp that they happen to have on their lines too, but for the most part, it's all sugar kelp. All right, so just again, letting you know that our site is right here in Sheep Bay. We had a really good experience working with Zeke and CDFU to figure out where to put it. Our original site was on this side, and it was not a great place for seiners, so we decided to move it right here. Like I showed you in our site selection, it's a rocky bottom, and that's one of the reasons why we did choose that site, because from what I understand, it means that the seiners aren't going to be seining there anyways. Okay, and if you were to take your drone out and look at it from an aerial view, this is what you would see. So the red line is our lease site. All of our permitting is done on a research basis, so it's a different process than the commercial farm leases, but we still had to talk to DNR, ADF&G, Army Corps, all of those fun, exciting things. But if you were to go out on the water, you would see these big, big yellow mooring buoys. They have NVE's name on it and then the permit number from DNR. These other orange buoys that are kind of coming off like little arms, those are telling us where the anchors are. And then all these buoys in the middle, that's the farm, that's the main line. Okay. So just to go through the process we've already talked about, I wanted to kind of tell the story of how everything's been going for us, how we did it, and hopefully some successes that we're seeing. So I'm going to start real quick with the process of going out and finding sori, sending it to a hatchery, building the farm and waiting for the baby kelps to be ready, planting, where we are right now is letting it grow, and some potential ideas for harvesting for our program. So we had the opportunity to go out with Noble Ocean and Royal Ocean and some other interested parties to collect sori tissue. It was a lot of fun. Here's Eric, one of our technicians, just trying to figure out how to get his gear on. It was a great morning. We had a beautiful weather, a -2 low tide, and we had a great sugar kelp and split kelp patch over in Windy Bay. It was, I think the trickiest part, at least for me, was making sure that we were getting sugar kelp instead of split kelp. They kind of look very similar, which we're going to play around with and I think just look at some sugar kelp here in a bit. And we didn't need any sort of scuba equipment. We had a bunch of wetsuits personally, so we put on our wetsuits, put some snorkel gear on. I got cold, so I was just wading around in the water for a bit. And we were able to find plenty of sori tissue. So this is a picture of sugar kelp. It's kind of weathered. You can see all the holes from being out in the environment in September. But this dark patch right here, like Tamsin said, it kind of looks like Nutella. That's the sori tissue. That's what we were looking for when we were out there. And we found it. We found plenty of it. So here's some other pictures of Eric again, trying to figure out how his gear works. I think that's me over there. And then this is the Myrmidon Tea's boat. So we were all just going around trying to get as much kelp as we could before the tide came in. Had a great morning. We're a little cold though. And then we took that sori tissue, and myself, Taya Thomas, Eric from NVE, and Alicia were able to go to Ulutikrai Marine Institute to actually process the tissue and germinate our little baby kelps on the seed spool. So there's a picture of Alicia, very meticulously putting all of the ribbon kelp sporophylls out, so that's what that is. Here's a similar image to what Tamsin showed you guys of what the spores look like under the microscope. And then this is a couple months into growing the kelp. You can see they're getting happy. And Taya was there for the whole process, so she got to see it from start to finish. This is a close-up of what those little baby kelp look like. And then, of course, I couldn't rob you of this picture. We might have seen it already, but I just like that picture.
Puts hair on your chest.
So while we were waiting for the baby kelp to grow up, we built our farm. This took a lot of engineering and a lot of time out of the water with Alaska Marine Response, so Andy Craig and his crew. They're great marine problem solvers. They do a lot of salvage work for any boats that go down basically anywhere in the Gulf of Alaska. But they were able to help us figure out how to put the anchors out, how to put the line in, and they had all the equipment to do so. So this is one of our 1,000-pound anchors that we put out and our chain. So like I said, our kelp farm is in much deeper water. So the expenses were higher for the anchoring system specifically because we needed really big anchors and we needed a lot of line for that scope. So for our system, and I'm not sure for your guys's, but we had a 3-to-1 scope. So you have to times all of your line by 3 times the depth of the water. So line can get expensive, especially the thick line that we were using, and this anchor chain. The anchor chain was probably the most expensive thing of the whole thing. All of the buoys that we used, we either got from local fishermen who are retiring, or quite a bit of these buoys were collected from marine debris. And that's a program that I think I'm gonna talk about in a minute, that we'd like to start looking for used buoys that are on the outside beaches to get rid of some marine debris and put everything back to work and get it out of the environment. Here's Jimmy Paley, our engineer, with our main line on land. And so that's all ready to go to be deployed. This is us with Andy, Craig, and Jimmy out on the water in Sheep Bay deploying the system. You can see behind us, so this is the main line with all of those buoys attached. There's no grow lines attached yet. Those little white spots, those are all attachment points for the grow lines. So we can easily take the grow lines off, bring them on board, or put them back in the water instead of being permanently attached to the main line. And that's the main line as it's all the way out. So again, we just have this one long line that has 15,000 feet of kelp on it.
Wow.
Whereas if you're using a catenary array, you need, I think, at least 2 of those football field sized systems.
Yeah.
Right, and here's the beckets. So this is what the grow line is going to attach to. Andy on the Elena K. And so for our system, one of the big question marks is how best to go seed the lines. Seeding the lines at seed, we had over 500 of these 30-foot lines that we had to seed, which would have meant like a week at sea in calm weather, which we knew we weren't going to get. So we seeded about 450 of them on land here at the Science Center. And then the next day we went out and put them in the water. We did have about a couple dozen lines that we just took the seed spools out with us to the site, and we're seeding them right into the water. And so we've been monitoring those to see how those lines do compared to all the other lines that we seeded on land. We call the ones that we seeded at sea the sassy lines.
How many people did you have there hands-on?
It was, all 4 of us were always there doing it. I think there was one day where there was just 4 of us. We had one day where we had a lot of volunteers. We had about between 6 and 8 people, which helped it go a lot faster. With 4 people, it took us 8 hours to do 250 lines.
And keeping because it was like you didn't see, it could freeze and knocks on the boat. Were there any challenges in there?
Yeah, one of the issues that we figured out is we needed to make sure that the lines were wet with seawater before we put the seed on them. A lot of it was weather and timing to make sure that, okay, we received, like we had to give APMI 2 days notice for them to ship the seed to us. And we had to make sure that the next day the weather was good enough that we could go out. So it was a very tight needle we were threading. That was a little stressful. So we were like, okay, we need to make sure that we can get this line out the next day. But as Tamsin said, with these seed spools, they can hang out in the cooler for a couple of days. Not too much longer, but. there's more wiggle room. So here is a picture of our engineer Jenny and Ruby Dombeck from Ocean Rainforest, who came out to help us put the farm in. They're seeding those lines. You can see one of the buoys on the main line, so we did it all by hand right on the water. In the Faroes, they have these great big aquaculture catamarans where they lift their whole line out of the water and do it on deck and are all comfortable and everything, but we figured out our own way to do it, and it worked pretty well. We got everything done pretty quickly. Here's Matt Bichet, our Natural Resource Director, and Jimmy having a lot of fun doing it. So this is a 1 pound piece of rebar that's at the end of each line to act as weight, because sugar kelp is a sinking kelp. It doesn't have those nematocysts to help it float. Okay, so our kelp is growing. We've been going out once a month since December to measure how long our little kelps are, how wide they are, and how many are on the line. Since we have 10 meters to deal with, we're just taking a few measurements every other meter. So we're doing the whole meter between 1 and 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8, 8 to 9. And we're following the methods of a previously published study by Ocean Rainforest because we want to compare our results to theirs. So maybe this month we're going to start going out every other week if we have time and weather allows, because this is the time of year when it's really starting to grow. So you can see this is a picture from January 24th. This is higher in the water column, closer to the sun, so getting quite a bit of growth. And then this little guy is deeper in the water. So I have a little bit of data to share with you. So this is the kelp blade growth. So on the bottom, we have our 3 different sampling time periods from December, January, and February, and then how long those fronds are. So that first we skipped the very top meter because we know it's going to grow really well at the top. That kind of, it goes without saying, and it's also an effort issue because it takes quite a long time to measure each one of these lines. So we just skipped the first meter. So 1 meter to 2 meter, we're getting some really nice growth. And then it does start going down, and the growth is much lower down at depth. It's still growing though. It hasn't stopped. It's not falling off or anything. But now we're getting these beautiful longer days with a lot of sun, so things should really be starting to amp up. And the spot that we picked in Sheepbag, we picked that because it's also further away from any of the heads and much less turbid. So fingers crossed, light penetration will go all the way down to 30 feet or so. And we know that sugar kelp grows at depths. There's plenty of spots around the sound at like 60 feet of water where sugar kelp is growing. So it's a question of how well is it growing and how well will it grow. Harvest time, this is still a question mark for us. So we're under a research permit, which means that we can't sell any of our kelp commercially. Some of the kelp can be used for product development, which we will try to open up and make available to our tribal members and any of the local people that want to start working on product development so that they're not wasting their own crops if they don't realize how the oven's supposed to be set or something like that. So Ocean Rainforest only plants their kelp once every 3 years, and they're able to just cut off the majority of the blade but leave quite a bit on, and that kelp will grow back over time. So we're going to be testing that as well. So we're not going to be completely harvesting the whole line. We're going to cut about 2/3 off and see if it will grow back. Like I was showing in my site selection presentation, is probably not going to grow back during the summer, but the fall we do get some big storms that do bring a lot of those nutrients up from the lower water column. So in the fall it might start growing again, or it might be able to weather throughout the winter and start growing again this time of year. We're not sure, so that's a big question mark that we're trying to learn. Also, we do want to leave some out there as habitat and see what's growing on it and what's living in it. Like I showed in that picture earlier in the morning, we're about 1/3 of a mile away from a salmon stream. Maybe it's great refugia for little pink salmon that are coming out of that stream. We're also working with the Mariculture Recon program with the Science Center, and they're doing everything for studying kelp from habitat effects at the very top of the food chain with marine mammals and seabirds. Rob and Ann Schaefer out in the water right now doing those transects. to the base of the food web of what's going on with plankton, nutrients, all the water stuff. So our farm is going to be a part of that program as well. Just real quick, we're trying to get a tribal youth mariculture program off of the ground. We're trying to provide opportunities for our teenagers to get involved with mariculture. We've had a couple super interested kids, like Ricky down here. She came with us on a snorkeling expedition in July. We're trying to work with the high school and the Prince William Sound College, so the students can earn school credits. The biggest thing that we're learning is that our high schoolers are busy, ridiculously busy, and it's hard for them to sometimes find time to do extracurricular activities if there's no incentive for college credit or high school credit. So hopefully we'll be getting that program further off the ground. And this whole program was started with money from the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, which is a North American consortium of federal environmental agencies. And they had a grant program called Environmental Justice for Climate, which is the first tranche of funding that we got for this program. Future directions, there's a whole lot of work to be done, as you guys have heard all day. We're going to figure out how well our new system works called MACR. We also are going to be looking into opportunities to research carbon dioxide removal strategies. Every single blade of kelp, every person, every living creature is made up of carbon. If you grow kelp, you're basically also growing carbon. You take that carbon and that kelp out of the water, you've just removed carbon from that system. What to do with that kelp after you've taken it out of the system is a big question around here. You put it in the landfill, it's going to degrade and then turn right back into CO2. So trying to figure out places to sequester all that carbon and all that kelp is an area of research that's pretty lucrative and kind of hot right now. So we're trying to get into that program. If we do ever decide to go towards the product development aspects of things, that is a tribal council level decision on whether or not they want to do any sort of commercial farming. Right now, the philosophy is not to conflict with local farmers. We're going to be looking at a commodities exchange. So we're only looking at that 5 cents or 8 cents per pound kind of commodities market, and not so much the really delicious products that Sky and Sean are producing. So livestock feed and kelp has some pretty cool compounding variables for climate change. If you feed cows even just a small bit of kelp, they reduce their methane emissions by about 80%, which is like too good to be true. So there's a lot of research that's going on with that right now. I mean, it's one of those things that I'm like, all right, when's the other shoe going to drop and we're going to find out we're like releasing some other sort of awful greenhouse gas. But we want to be able to ramp up product development for livestock feed if it does work out. I know, it's like, yay!
There's a lot of research on the internet about that, though.
Yeah.
Lots.
Yeah. The Ocean Rainforest has been working with some farmers in the country to develop those products.
So send some of this stuff up there, last thing on feed.
Yes. Yes. I think that would be great because one of the last dairy.
Their own feed.
Yeah, one of the last dairy farms in Alaska had to shut down just because they couldn't get feed here. And it's like, we should be able to grow our own feed from the ocean and give it to our cattle and stuff. Yeah.
Lots of places that use feed.
Yep.
What about
Even in town, we have some tribal members who have like chickens, seeing if it works for them.
Oh,
Yep. We'd also like to research bull kelp just like everybody and see if we can do anything with those problems. But that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions?
Look at that cow.
I just love that picture.
You didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
Well, there are big cattle farms up in Delta and stuff. They just ship food up there on the freaking train.
Yep.